Was anybody here when I spoke in 2022? Ooh, 2 or 3. Does anybody in here know who I am? Okay, I'll just explain because it's not that many. My name's Andrea Foulkes. What I've been doing for the last 23 years since I had an awakening. So I'll just do a brief introduction of explaining who I am and what I do. So after my big awakening, which was not in any mystical land, it was in Sloane Square in London. I had a big awakening there. I was being rewired in retrospect by probably benevolent beings from other dimensions and probably my own authentic self. I was told not to work for 3 months. I didn't work for 3 months, and all the things that happened came true that they told me was going to happen, all the channel messages, everything. And I do believe in retrospect they were probably benevolent, probably Pleiadians, maybe a few Andromedans, Arcturians. I really connect with those beings if we were talking about multidimensional beings that I personally resonate with. So after that happened, I had, like I said, a massive awakening. Very quickly, I started to be able to see people's past lives. To cut a long story short, I went into a development class where they didn't really realize my true potential, so I went somewhere else. They saw my potential. They said, this is going to be your life. I'm like, I don't think so. And very quickly, I ended up, after seeing past lives, I learned past life regression, but I could already see people's past lives, and I could read what I call now the emotional Akashic records. And I'm very specific in what I say in the emotional Akashic records. So after I did that, I ended up on ITV on This Morning back in 2004, and for nearly a year I was the past life regression expert there, regressing celebrities and members of the public back into past lives. And ITV commissioned a series that I did with the now shamed Philip Schofield, but 2 series taking celebrities back into past lives. I was always pushing to show the healing aspect. That is my passion, to show the healing aspect of going into your subconscious mind, that you can heal things within yourself. I spoke here in 2022, which is probably in some back catalogue on Kerry's website if you want to hear that talk. I do deal a lot with entities and spirit releasement, and that talk was predominantly around dealing with entities and spirit releasement. So I won't repeat myself, even though there weren't many of you here then, but I will talk a little bit about that just to make the rest of it make sense. I'm going to speak predominantly for probably about an hour, and then the last half an hour I'll do questions and answers, because I think after you've spoken a little bit, people then have burning questions, and I think sometimes your questions bring forth more information than what I might channel through. I don't prepare anything because I just work off your group energy of what you need to hear. So usually what I bring forth will see people nodding, going, oh yes, that's something I wanted to know or hear. I will also sing light language, if any of you are familiar with that. I also sing not just light language, I sing sophophonic frequencies within light language, which are the high vibrational tones, because ultimately, the whole universe is made up of sound and vibration and frequency. So the light language came to me personally in 2011, but when I started speaking light language, I realized that I'd been speaking light language as a child, and all those memories of speaking in other languages came back to me. And I think a lot of what we do is, and what I hope I'm going to give you today, is the permission slip for you to be who you truly are without limit and lack, which has been pushed upon us, programmed upon us. It's not who we truly are. And when we start to release all that fear and guilt and shame and programming, which is why I say I deal with the emotional Akashic records. So in the work that I've done, I've been weaving in my own technique between past lives, inner child, ancestral, spirit releasement, and between lives, because I don't believe that you can do one without the other. And there's probably people in the room saying, oh, I think you can. I don't think you can. I had a unique experience by being on TV. And the reason I say that I had a unique experience, the unique aspect of it was in this work, you usually get clients here and there. So from doing this on television, I was getting 1,000 emails a day of people wanting sessions. I could never see all of the people, and often when we took a waiting list and we contacted them, they were no longer interested, because I was the beginning of their spiritual journey. It wasn't like many of you here, they weren't on a journey of exploration. There was a lot of people who over the weeks of watching and over a year and repeated series started to be intrigued in their past lives. Many of them didn't realize there were healing aspects to what they were seeing when they went inside themselves, and were amazed at the healings that took place within themselves. Many of them do that work now themselves, which is a joy for me to know that that's led people on to opening up to who they truly are. Many of them speak light language now, which is amazing. And it's great to have watched other people's journey over, 20 years plus of what's happened to them. And also to share today maybe a little bit of the things that I've noticed over the last 23 years of regressing people. I've noticed probably something might be of interest to most of you here is I've seen less greys attached to people. Back in 2006, you would see greys attached to people. Now I don't really see greys attached to people. I see multidimensional lower astral realm beings attached to them. And I also see, deceased souls from this planet attached to them. Predominantly, I guide them into releasing them, which is what I covered in the other talk that I gave here a couple of years ago, going into the minutiae detail of dealing with entities. So in past lives, we're going into our emotions and why those past lives are still hanging on. And sometimes they're not past lives, they're galactic timelines as well. A really interesting story that's come to mind to share with you, because I think we've seen a lot of people who feel like they're in the wrong body. This is a current trend of people feeling like they're in the wrong body. Now, predominantly when I see people who say, I feel like I'm in the wrong body, I feel like I should be the other gender, predominantly I see trauma from childhood. I see a past life overlay of predominantly being the other gender. And this is the first lifetime of experiencing being the opposite gender, and it takes some adjustment. So that's why it feels very uncomfortable to be in that body. So formulaically, that's what I started to see, and usually some birth trauma. But then I had this young man who said, I feel like I'm in the wrong body and I want to be a girl. And I spoke to his mum and I spoke to him, and there was some trauma from birth that we needed to clear, so we cleared that. But then when I tuned in to think I'm going to see this past life in this lifetime, that wasn't what I saw. What I saw was he had a galactic timeline linked to being in an androgynous planet where there is no gender. So coming here was something completely new, that you could be in a gender form, because he's not used to that. And so we ended up talking, and he ended up coming to the realization that it wouldn't serve him in this lifetime to change his gender. It would serve him to go through the whole lifetime and just experience a whole lifetime in the gender that the creation form had given him, which predominantly in my experience is usually the solution. I usually see people who've had changes not be happy ultimately over 5 years, and sometimes change back in 2. But if they deal with the core issue of why they've made these choices, there can be a lot of resolution. In that work, I don't usually go into the cause and effect if someone's already had post-op and they're on hormone replacements. That would not be kind, because once you've gone down that path and you've made that decision, you really don't want to mess with someone's mind once they've made that choice, even if there are other mitigating reasons for that to be as it is. So I just thought I'd cover that because it's quite an interesting topic and it's very powerful right now. But if you see that it's coming from somewhere else, and every issue that we have has a cause and effect. And I know in my own life, I've healed myself from polycystic ovaries. I healed my left ankle here back in 2019 when they said I wouldn't walk if I didn't do surgery. And I was like, with the greatest love and respect for the work you do, I will just do what I've done for 20 years. And it is a journey. And I understand that when we're sort of suggesting to you that, maybe you don't need surgery, I think sometimes you do, because unless you can shift your consciousness, you're probably better off taking the allopathic path, because it's not for the faint-hearted. This deep inner work is not for everybody. When I healed my ankle, I had to surrender into dying twice, but I'm still here. So the path of healing is deep, and often what I'm seeing at the moment is people will look at their past lives and they may think they've cleared a lot of them, but what's coming up now a lot is the inner child, and that's always the hardest thing for us to face. I see people who say, oh, I've healed my inner child. And I'm like, okay, well, shall we have a look and see where you've got to? And, the truth of it is we've gone as far as we're willing to go. This is deep. This is very painful. And usually when we start going into the inner child, it will lead us back into the womb. Like I had a gentleman the other day and I was talking to him and he said, I can only talk to you because I'm laying down. I can't speak when I'm standing up. I'm like, okay. I love the quirky ones. I'm like, okay, that's a quirky one. Let's see where this is coming from. And I'm like, oh, I can see you were a forceps delivery. And he went, yes, that's correct. And so, the reasons of why he couldn't speak when he stood up were linked to the birth, linked to an over-controlling mother, which a lot of people have that. I'm your loving mother, but you have to do what I say. Whether we are that over-controlling mother or we have that over-controlling mother, it sometimes works out harder for gentlemen with the over-controlling mother, because you become the substitute husband to the mother. It's not sexual, but you get controlled by her. And when I take you back, there's usually a time in childhood, and it doesn't have to be sexual trauma, although there often is a lot of that. Often it's the day you decided your primary caregiver's happiness was more important than your own happiness. And if that happens in the first 7 years of your life, which for most of us it will, and it's not something dramatic, it's something really small, like you'll be playing in the park and mummy said, don't get your shoes dirty, I've paid a lot of money for those shoes. And then the other children invite you to play with them and you decide, oh, but I'd love to play with the other children, but mummy said don't get the shoes dirty. And then if I get the shoes dirty, she's going to shout at me. So what shall I do? I'll make mummy happy. And if you made the decision to make mummy happy instead of rebelling, you then set this pattern in motion to always be a people pleaser, always trying to make other people happy. And then your happiness comes from making other people happy. And then you don't make yourself happy. And then when I see you as an adult in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 80s, I've seen people in their 80s, you're already so deeply programmed that it's almost inconceivable to yourself to realize that you've got this programming. You don't even know you're a people pleaser because it's all you know. So it's a bit like being a ship. You've got to turn it round and sail it in another direction. And that's not always as easy and straightforward as we think it's going to be, because we feel like we're betraying our previous self. We're betraying the programmed self, Often I'll get people who've got lots of entities attached or are really, determined in a child, and they'll sabotage the session. They'll sabotage coming to see me before they even get to see me. They'll make all kinds of excuses why they can't come. And that's you trying to stay in your comfort zone. But to heal, you have to leave the safety and the harbour of the comfort zone. And that is terrifying. That is the biggest fear you'll ever probably face, is leaving your own comfort zone. You know, so that's an important aspect to this work. And then when we go into the past lives, you know, we're looking at past lives. Some of them will be galactic timelines. You know, you might see those timelines. When I go between lives with people, people go into seeing benevolent beings. Now, these are predominantly their soul star. I call them their soul star family. And by that, I mean beings that they've known from other timelines, other dimensions, who they are on a soul level, who you truly are. And these benevolent beings seem to have been with you since the beginning of your existence of being. And they love you unconditionally. And the overriding story that comes through predominantly is, it's a play. I've taken it all far too seriously. It's just a play. And I'm an actor, and I'm the lead actor or actress in my own play and story. And it's always been me who's the worst enemy. You know, although there are beings out there that might try to sabotage you, the beings that will sabotage you the most is you. You know, not realizing facets of you, you know, because it's always you holding you back, you know, and different people bring up different energies with us. Like the other day, I went with a friend of mine. We went to Silbury Hill. She climbed Silbury Hill. And then we went to Merlin's Mount. If you've heard of Merlin's Mount in Marlborough College, we climbed that. Now, as we were climbing that, she became like a St. Trinian schoolgirl. I became like matron. I'm like, they're going to see us. You know, kind of. So you observe your own personality of what something brings up in you. And we got away with it. Nobody saw us. We went to the top and we came down. And, you know, we did pass people, but we got away with it. And I was like, ooh, this is a new fear, because I'm pretty fearless, but this environment has triggered some fear of, I don't want to be told off, but it doesn't matter anyway, because who are these people to tell us off? You know, so when you can observe your irrational behavior of yourself and observe all these things, and then if you have things that are coming towards you that you don't like you see a repeated pattern happening, you're like, why is this happening to me? I'm quite a nice person in this lifetime. Why am I having these patterns happening? And one of my own shadow lives that I had to face, because predominantly what you'll see originally when you go into past lives, when you start doing this work and you go into them enough times and you see enough past lives, you'll see where you've been a victim. You'll see where people have done terrible things to you. And then when we go through all the terrible things people have done to you and we make resolution and resolve, then we'll see the terrible things you've done to people, you know, and you have to face the darkest of the darkest shadow of yourself. This is the only way that you leave the matrix, in my opinion, from my experience with lots of clients. There's no way you're going to get out of this matrix unless you make resolution in. And it's not like you need to see every single past life you've ever lived, although you might. Sometimes they become like a carousel just whizzing round and people start to see flashbacks of lots of different lives. But if you get the key life, often the other lifetimes are just a replication of the key lifetime, because you haven't resolved all the facets of the key lifetime. Now, one of my key lifetimes was I was attracting certain kinds of gentlemen. And I was like, why am I attracting these kinds of men? And I had to take the last one that was the final straw that broke the camel's back, that I was like, I can't believe it, you know? Why am I attracting these kinds of people? And that affect bridge that I used was, as a young girl, my dad used to say, who do you think you are, the Queen of Sheba? Now, I'm not saying I was the Queen of Sheba, but I certainly was in a temple at some point, and I may well have known that lady, and the temples of Solomon. And I knew this gentleman from the temples of Solomon. So I used that to ask within myself as what we call an affect bridge, which is like a trigger back into a past life. Show me the darkest of the dark that I have ever seen or done. And with that, the Akashic records opened, and I was running a temple, and there was all these gorgeous, frolicking gladiators, and, they weren't really interested in me, but I was interested in them in a past life. And I made them have a child with me, and I had 8 children by 8 gentlemen that really didn't want to be with me. And I'd had to meet them all again in this lifetime, because I'd done terrible things in that lifetime. I'd got rid of the children they'd had with the women that they truly loved in that lifetime, which was a truly dreadful thing to do. So we have to feel the guilt, the shame. Oh my goodness, what have I done? Terrible, terrible things. And then you release them. And often this is people's fear in past lives, that they're not going to be able to face that dark shadow life. How am I going to emotionally deal with seeing the worst of the worst that I may have done? And the truth of it is, you will not see what you're not emotionally ready to see. I had a lady once, I don't remember where she'd flown from, but she'd made a big effort to come and see her past lives. And as I'm taking her through the process of seeing the past lives, and there was one particular lifetime or door that I felt was really important for her to go to. And she was like, no, not going in there. And in the skill sets that I have, often you might be stopped from going into a past life by an entity attached. So I have to make sure there's not an entity blocking you from seeing this, that it is genuinely your past life. That was what came up when I used to work on TV, because we weren't just taking people into past lives. We were actually researching the past lives to prove these people exist. And the great thing is that even when that week they say, oh, there's no evidence, we've researched this and we found no evidence to prove this person exists. What I loved was that the members of the public would ring up or email in saying, oh, I think you're incorrect. I found this person and they do exist. So it's very important that we are accurate about what we're seeing and doing, which forced me to go into the deeper aspects of making sure that they are your past lives you're seeing, and that you're not missing anything. There's no little hidden corner where you're not seeing things. And we're going into, things that are causing pains in your body, manifestations in your body. And these you can be perfectly healthy, and then you meet somebody in this lifetime, and the connection with that soul, or what we might call deja vu, of being in a place where you go, I've been here before, I know if you turn left and right, we'll be where we need to be. Those cellular memories, can trigger the past life memories. So you can literally be fine one day, wake up the next morning, and have some serious ailment by being triggered by a memory of a past life, by literally meeting somebody or going to a location where that past life existed. And you haven't cleared that past life. You haven't cleared the story that you're holding. Because when I take you through the past lives, what's quite shocking to most people, and on average, most people only have 9 significant events in a lifetime. Now, there'll be some people who have more, some people, I doubt they have less, but most are 9. So if you think, wow, 9 significant events in a lifetime, that makes up the totality of your lifetime on average. What are these significant events? When I take you through the regression to the last day of that lifetime, and I ask you, what are your thoughts? What are your regrets? What are your beliefs? At the point of your soul leaving your body, that lifetime really doesn't matter if you let it all go. But if you don't let it all go, and you take regrets and frustrations and angers and bitterness and jealousy and fear and all those things with you, that's what you'll take into the next lifetime. And then you just keep repeating this pattern until we get off this cycle. Like once I had a massage, someone was massaging me, and when you massage the myofascia in someone's body, you can bring up cellular memory. So this lady gave me a massage, and she didn't have the full skill set to understand what she might be triggering. And she triggered a memory of me being an African lady with one leg. And it took me quite a while to get my left leg to work again. Even when I went to see the chiropractor, he's like, your muscles are not firing in the the back of your leg. I said, no, because this memory came forward of me being an African woman, with one leg. And I've had to tell my subconscious, you are not an African woman with one leg. You have two legs, And I can remember being in a yoga class, because I don't really care. And she's like, you're struggling there. I'm like, yes, it's just because the memory of being an African woman with one leg's just come up. So don't worry, I'll work through that, And also what I noticed when I would move house, put things in storage for a while, because I went through a period of doing that, my wrists would be weak after that. They'd be weak. For some reason, it was the fear of moving forward. Sometimes it's your ankles and your legs with the fear of moving forward, but sometimes it's your wrists, and that energy will just work through your body. But once you become aware of yourself and your weaknesses, you can start to work through that. I'd get to the point where if I was moving house, I'd have to put wrist braces on for a couple of weeks till I'd worked through that issue, because it just blocked stuck energy in my wrists and I had to clear it. And sometimes it wouldn't be immediate, although our healings can be immediate. We don't necessarily need to see the past lives, even though I do past life regression. I don't think we necessarily need to see them if we can enter that space of what I call divine forgiveness. And when I healed myself of polycystic ovaries, that was when I entered divine forgiveness. And this was way before the awakening that came later. And my dad, who's still alive, he's 98, they came to my house in London and they brought me a book from the 1970s by a guy called Harvey Day called The Hidden Power of Vibrations. And I opened this book, and at the time I had the polycystic ovaries, and I was really in agony because they push on your sciatic nerve. And in this book, it fell open on a page. There was a woman riddled with cancer, and they told her to go home and die. And she turned to her husband and she said, I truly forgive you of all your affairs. And with that, the cancer flew out of her body because she entered divine forgiveness. And I just got it. I was like, that's it. You have to forgive everyone and everything. And with that, this energy just flew through my body and the polycystic ovaries were gone, because that afternoon I went to the hospital to be scanned. And they said, why are you here? I said, because I have recurring polycystic ovaries. And she said, but there's no collapsed cell tissue. I said, well, there must be. And she said, there's nothing, they're gone. So, from being in agony in the morning and entering that divine forgiveness, they had not only a scrap of evidence remained by the afternoon, because I'd entered naively that divine forgiveness. I wasn't aware of, because it was early in my journey of awakening. I wasn't really trying to think, I need to see a past life, I need to do this. I just entered divine forgiveness. But that didn't mean that there weren't other lifetimes I had to see. It didn't mean that in my awakening journey I could scan people and see their past lives, as many of you might be able to see. You can be stood in a queue in a coffee shop and you can download the whole of someone's Akashic records, not meaning to, you're not meaning to do it, but that can happen, and you can hear and feel everything that's ever happened to them, even though they have a denial of self, and it would not be appropriate with someone in a coffee shop. But if they come to you as a client, even then you have to be discerning, because you might see that sexual abuse is the cause of their issue, but if they think that they have not been sexually abused, and you ask it in a very sweet, cute way, that they don't really realize what you're actually asking. But I've learned from experience that I would never suggest to tell somebody something that's so deep and so personal, because if they're not ready to process it, and I've seen people where I think we come at points in our lives when our trauma comes up to be processed. And I've seen so many people end up sectioned, not my clients, but I've seen people be sectioned because the trauma that came up to be processed, they weren't ready to process it. And because they weren't ready to process it, they had a psychotic meltdown. And it was not to do with taking drugs or anything like that. It was just they're not ready to process their shadow self. And not everybody is, not everybody is going to process their shadow self. Some people are going to come back in this lifetime and do it all over again, because that's where they're at. There's nothing right or wrong in that. It's just where we're at. Where I think we're going now, from my perception of reality, I might be wrong. I don't think any of us have the ultimate truth right now. I think we have our truth, but the absolute truth, I'm not sure there is an absolute. I think we're all We're all in this room, we're all hearing something different, we're all perceiving me differently, and I know this from running workshops, doing guided meditation with people. I know that when I have done guided meditation, if I'm saying something and my mind's thinking something else, I've had people in a group some of them heard what I said, and some of them said, oh, you know when you said this in the meditation? And I'm like, I didn't actually say that, but I thought it in my mind. So some of them tuned into the thoughts. So you have to become impeccable in what you're doing, because otherwise they'll tune into either what you're saying or what you're thinking, and you want to be in divine alignment to just one thing so that they're not all getting mixed up and you're helping people release things. And so thinking about all that, when we go on to the ancestral healing, recently I had a head of a Native American tribe come to me, which was a great honor, because he said, I've been looking my whole life for someone with the skill sets you've got to help me. And, you can be anywhere doing this work. This is the interesting thing about this work. I was sat outside the hospital, because I've been visiting my dad, doing this great, amazing session in my healing chariot, my car, and just doing this work, and often when clients say to me, there's people in the house, I'm going to have to change the time of the session. I'm like, could you go and sit in your car, do you think? Because, no one's going to bother you in the car. It's one of the most powerful places to make sound. When I talk about sound later, make sound in your car. Nobody is going to tell you off for making sound in your car. You can be as loud as you want to be in your car. So with this gentleman, we saw all these tribes, ancestors, all coming forward to be healed, to hear their story, tell their story, to release all this trauma that they've been carrying. And often when you say, oh, we've got heart disease in our family. No, you don't have heart disease in your family. What you have is a story of the ancestors that's never been addressed, and everyone's just repeating the pattern emotionally of behaving the same way as the ancestor with the original trauma did. And if you can get back to the original ancestor, you can change the timeline for the future generations of your family, because you're going to have to deal with the emotional trauma in that lineage of your family. And not everybody wants to do that, and not everybody believes it. We can't force people into a healing journey that don't want to go into a healing journey. And I do believe that it is an individual process to go through your emotional Akashic records and trawl through all those aspects of yourself. And, sometimes when we're doing the inner child work, we'll see a fragment of you stuck, in a home that you lived in with your parents, or a school, and that needs to be with you. And you can retire your parents. You're adults now. You can retire your biological parents to being just other flawed humans having a physical experience. You now can become the adult parent of your own inner child. Your parents need to just be people having an experience on planet Earth. And when you retire your parents from that role, and also when you understand your parents' journey and your parents' story and what happened to them, then you have huge compassion and forgiveness for their story of how they got to be where they're at. And then that allows you to forgive their behavior in your childhood or in your adult life and the things they say to you. And sometimes it isn't them saying these things, Sometimes it's entities coming through them. So the hurt that you felt, they don't even know they said those things, because it wasn't them. They just had a hole in their energy field, and an entity came through and said something really vile and horrid to you about you, and you took it personally. And it really wasn't about you. And when you realize that that's what's happening, that some of the most hurtful things are said by the people you love the most, then you set yourself free from all this suffering that you've held in your heart for such a long time. So it's important that we take that thought into our hearts today, and that we can release ourselves from all this trauma that we've been carrying. And there are beings in other dimensions of reality, and they will come in and step in and help. And in the past I've said, why do you help some people and not other people? Why is this? And they said, well, it really depends on the potentiality of your soul and what you're going to do. And if you're going to be helping other people and be in service, then it's more likely you'll be saved because you've got something bigger to do. And if you're really quite a selfish person, then you might be allowed to just die in that accident. It might be your time to go. In the eternity of your soul, we can't get too enamored in just one lifetime. I do think we can live a lot longer than we've been told we can. But I look at my own dad at 98, still driving, living on his own. If I looked at some of the things I say, he's not doing those things. He's living a very different reality. But I do believe he's from a different star system maybe than where I'm from. How things are where he's from are slightly different. And he also came in on the planet where we probably didn't get vaccinated so much. And so there are lots of other mitigating circumstances of why these people live a lot longer than, maybe how long people live now. And then there's lots of other things around birthing. I see that, like I said, the man with the forceps on his head, that changed, that when we release the trauma, because we can go back in that timeline and release the trauma from the baby's head, that happened then. So there's so many interesting stories to share with you. And as I go along now, I'm feeling like guided to say, does anybody have a question, a burning question? Because I know when I hear people speak, sometimes I think, I've forgotten what the question was by the time they went, and now you may ask a question. Does anybody have a question as I'm speaking? That gentleman there? Yeah. Yeah, he was just saying, if everyone could hear, he was saying he's had a connection with someone who was his father in a past life and isn't his father in this lifetime, and a friend, and it's kind of helped you on your spiritual journey. And that's the thing, we take on different roles and different incarnations with people. And, you've reminded me of a story. I had someone who, even when I worked on TV, she was one of the researchers there, and then she ended up living in Glastonbury, and we ended up being really good friends, and I felt like her mother in this lifetime, but I'm not her mother in this lifetime, but I was her mother in a past life. And eventually our friendship parted, and I said, I can't be here for you anymore, I have to let this go. And the pain in my heart was huge to release that. To release her from my heart and set her free to walk her own journey. The same when I had a childhood friend who ended up being sectioned in this lifetime. I woke up in the night thinking I was dying, and it was my 6-year-old self was enmeshed in her 8-year-old self, and I had to release it. Otherwise, I felt like I might die. These are the complexities of the connections between us on a soul level that, we're not meeting. I doubt anybody in this room who probably hasn't met each other before in some other lifetime, that we've all met each other in other timelines, and we've played out different roles, different stories, and the other story around abundance and money and all this, we can let all this go as well, because that's one of our other stories that we hold about money and fear and lack, and once we let all that go, it's completely different. And then we think that, if they've got more money, they're going to have an easier life, and it's not necessarily true, I remember when I lived in London, I had a mystical dry cleaners that I used to go to, and this gentleman had spiritual books under the counter. And he said, I owned these books, not the ones under the counter, but other books in another lifetime. And I remember that they brought me nothing but unhappiness, these books. And I found them in this lifetime. He said, and they're really valuable books. And I said, what did you do with them? And he went, I burnt them. So, he just wanted to be free. He just totally wanted to be free. And that's the thing, sometimes we do things to set ourselves free that don't make sense to other people. I remember I was traveling once, and a friend of mine's quite a really well-known artist, and she gave me a painting, and she said, you know, just write on the back of it while you're traveling, and then when you finish traveling, burn it. I was like, ooh. And that's so interesting that the artist gave me permission to burn her painting. So I travelled the world, got back to my parents' house, which was my motherland, because they lived in the same house I lived as a child. So that's your motherland, you know. So that land will always have healing energies for you. If you're familiar with the Anastasia Ringing Cedars books, that land has power. And if you're planting seeds while you're healthy, don't do it when you're sick, but while you're healthy, suck the seeds before you plant them, and then it always has the energies and the enzymes and the DNA codes that you need to heal yourself. If you have a child, do that with a child, so that while they're healthy, the seeds have got their perfect, pristine DNA codes on them. So I burnt this painting in the garden, and the only bit that didn't burn was one tiny little piece that said Pleiadian on it. And so I thought that was quite funny, you know. So we're always being spoken to, we're always being communicated by these beings. I see these beings, sometimes I see the beings from Sirius B, I don't know how you see them, I see them as a blue orb flying energetically. Often when it's the solstice, I won't take people to Glastonbury Tor, I take people to Barrow Mump, because to me that's more the divine feminine energy in my mind's eye, and I see a lot of blue beings at Barrow Mump, so I feel that's a more feminine energy to take people to, you know. And then we have the ley lines, you know, which we're all familiar with the power of the ley lines and how they can affect us personally, and these plasma solar flares that are coming in just now. You know, I don't feel we can stay in the sun, or me personally anyway, I can't stay in the sun as long as I used to, because the downloads that are coming in from the photons of the great central sun, I need to really integrate that energy, so I can't lay in the sun like I used to lay in the sun, because I'm seeing a lot of people saying they're getting lightheaded now from this energy that's coming in. Now, whether it is the energy just from the solar sun, or it's the satellites, the 5G and all that electromagnetic smog that's around us, you know, we're not sure. We just have to ground ourselves, we have to earth ourselves, we have to be barefoot in nature and allow this healing of ourselves to take place. Because when we go into these lives, whether they're galactic or past lives, because they're all coexisting, but emotionally we're releasing the stories that we hold. You know, I think I might have told this story when I was here before, but, you know, I had a gentleman, which I do love this story, because he said, I've got these pains in my stomach and they've been here since I was 30. When I got to 30, the pains existed. And it was linked to going back to a past life where he'd been a prostitute in the 1920s in a European country. And when he released the past life, the pains went. But they'd come when he'd gone to that country in this lifetime, and they'd appeared when he got to the same age. So when he got to 30, those pains happened, you know. And so it's lovely in regression to see a gentleman going, oh, I'm a lady giving birth, you know. I have to say I do linger a bit longer. Oh, like, you know, let's see what that's like, you know, feel that experience. But if you are experiencing and you go very deeply into a past life, which some people do, most people, it's a bit like going to the cinema and you remember fragments of the film that feel important to you. But there are people who go back into past lives and they really don't remember a word they've said. You know, they're really very deeply in that lifetime and they don't have a memory of it. But they're healing really deep, powerful stuff that is going to serve you beyond this lifetime. You know, it's going to serve you for many, many lifetimes to come. You know, the work that you do in this lifetime now is so important. That's why we're here in this room. That's why we're on the planet, so that we can heal our emotional Akashic records. And then we have options of where we're going to go next, what we want to do. Our body's always talking to us. You know, it's always showing us whether we're in alignment or out of alignment. You know, some things are always happening to us. I mean, only the other week, I have a little place in Cornwall, a shack on the beach. And as far as I was aware, I'd been there, been out with a friend to some indie film. The next thing, I woke up unconscious on the floor. But I did see a spider on the wall, and some of you might be aware of the interdimensional spider beings. I noticed this spider, and I thought, that doesn't, look like a spider I'm familiar with, because I'm not frightened of spiders. I'm used to being bitten more than average, maybe where I live, but I get bitten by spiders quite a lot. And so to find myself unconscious on the floor and ending up in the hospital laying on a trolley for 9 hours while I felt my body was being shut down and being sucked out, but I managed to stay, was quite a challenge. And we go through these experiences. Probably not helped that I had a MacBook Pro on a chair and I fell forward and hit my head. But it took me about a week to get over that. And I think this is the thing, you can't give in to fear. So then you're like, oh, what if I just collapse on the floor again? Because there was no warning, I feel all dizzy. But then a week later, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go for a 2-hour walk without my phone in the middle of nowhere where I live. And if I collapse in a field, so be it, And when you take that attitude, that is what saves you. When you go, I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to start limiting my life because I've experienced some trauma, which means now I must always travel with my phone. I must have it all charged at all times because something might happen to me. When you start going into that, you limit your life and you live in lack, and then you go into a lesser version of yourself, and you're not here to be in that lesser version of yourself. You're here to be the multidimensional version of you. And I know that we're multidimensional, and I know that we can bend time and space and reality. And one particular experience that I had personally was a friend had given me this syrupy kind of homemade Ribena kind of thing. And I was like, thanks, but I don't really drink things with sugar. But I took it. I didn't say I don't want it. I stuffed it in the fridge. And it must have been there nearly a year. And then I opened the fridge door on a hot summer's day and it exploded. And it didn't just explode the juice. The glass shattered and the glass went all round the kitchen, up the stairs. The juice went on the ceiling. And I looked down at myself and there was not one drop on me, and there was one tiny shard of glass in my knee, but I just pulled it out. Now, there's no way by the laws of quantum physics that glass could have either gone round me, it should have gone into me, but it either went through me. I somehow bended time and space and reality so that not one drop touched me. So when you have these experiences, then you start to realize I am a multidimensional being. I can do things that are beyond time and space and reality, but you have to give yourself permission to be that version of you. And nothing in this reality that we live in the programmed society and the programmers and the elite want you, and they're not elite, they're lesser beings. They don't want you to know how amazing and powerful you are, because once you realize how amazing and powerful you are, it's game over. You don't need to be told what to do. You don't need a president. You don't need a prime minister, because you're a sovereign being in yourself. And that's why you're crowned with, when you see the pictures of Mary depicted with stars and a halo, it's their aura, it's the fact that they've reached what you would call, from biblical terms, Bethlehem. And there are people who would depict the Bible in an allegory that it's actually about your physical body, and Bethlehem is awakening your crown chakra. So when you start to turn everything around and see everything's about you taking your power and divinity back and your mastery of self. Does anybody else have a question now? Yes, I think what you mean by volunteer, she feels like she's a volunteer in this lifetime. My interpretation of that, so you can nod if you agree or disagree, I think when you say you're a volunteer means you didn't have to come here, you had other options of going maybe somewhere else, not in a physical body, some other planet, whatever, but you chose to come here to be in service and to help the shifting of consciousness. I'm getting tingles now of my head. Yeah, you came here to be of service to this planet, to humanity, might not feel like it, now you're here. You know, often we think, oh, this is way more challenging than, you know, from the non-physical form, you know, especially when you're picking the family, which leads me on to another story about picking families. What I've seen is most people aren't conscious enough to pick their children. You know, you as a couple are not, in general, conscious enough to pick your children. If you were conscious enough, you would know how to sift and sort. And so when I was dating someone, there was this baby hanging around, and it said it had been the guy I was dating's child in a past life, and it wanted to be his child again, and it didn't want him to leave the mother, because in the past life he'd abandoned the mother in the past life. And getting to know him, I could see that he would have abandoned me, or I would have abandoned him. It was not going to work out. And so I had to tell this soul that was hanging around that I didn't want to be its mummy, and it really wasn't interested in me. It was like, you're dating him, that's how I get to be his child. It's quite mercenary. It's not all, oh, cutesy, she seems nice. You know, it's like, I'll use you because you're of use. You know, so you have to work out whether this soul coming in, if you learn to consciously communicate with these souls, you can sort of sift and sort, you know, and say, well, no, I don't really want to be your mother, you know, and if he works on the past life where he knew you, he might not have to be your father either. You know, we could clear all this stuff without you needing to incarnate into these complex stories. So that's an important thing too. And there was a gentleman, he wrote a book. He's not alive anymore, and I can't remember his name, but the book is the only title called this, Spirit Babies, where he could see the orbs of the babies. And he said he went somewhere on vacation once, and this orb, which he used to think was dead people, he saw this orb and it went, no, I'm not a dead person. I am waiting for my parents to arrive. They're arriving in this place after you. When you leave, I'm here ready for them to be conceived. And he's like, really? And it was before data protection. And he found out the names of the people that the orb had said, and they were the next people coming to stay in the lodge, you know. So, gentleman at the back.
I see the lights, not incorrectly, but directly, and they come in like brilliant white, silver, blue. I mean, people tell you what they are, but what are they?
I think they're just multi-dimensional craft, and I think because I saw one last night, you know, I live outside Glastonbury, but the middle of nowhere, and I can look from my house across the field to Glastonbury Tor, and there was this massive white light, and it just faded away, like shh. You know, it wasn't anything other than some other multi-dimensional being. And I think when I came here in 2022, I think I filmed a plasma orb somewhere on the drive. You know, so these are just, we're moving between dimensions of reality, and that's what they can't control. They can't control that you are awakening. So everything they're doing is to distract you. You know, like let's create the distraction so you don't see what's really going on. You don't believe that these are multidimensional beings and energy orbs that you're seeing, and that they ridicule you and make you feel like you're simple and stupid, which you're not. You know, you're wise. And so the whole of the thing is set up not to empower you to be yourself, you know, and that's the key thing to all of this is, you know, and over the years that I've done this, which has obviously been 23 years full time, every day, day in, day out now. The thing is, though, I don't really tone it down that much for most people. And I think given the opportunity to talk about it, and that wrinkle in time when I did this on TV, and I used to get 1,000 emails a day when we would go to air, showed me that there are more people that are having mystical experiences, are having spiritual experiences, but they don't know where to go to talk about it, you know, and their families don't support it. You know, in my family, my dad is probably the most spiritually aware person, which leads me to another story which will be quite interesting. once I was somewhere meeting someone, I saw this really dark energy come through this guy in France. And my dad rang me the next day and said, "Where were you at 7:30 last night?" And I said, "Oh, why?" And he said, "Well, you walked into the house here. And so although I thought I saw this dark entity through this guy, which I did, at the same time, my dad saw me walk into their house in spirit form, and he even described the clothes I was wearing. So I had gone to my parents' house to be safe, even though I thought I stayed there. You know, and so I think a lot of us do that. You know, we're multidimensional. We can move between time and space. You know, that I was speaking to some of you earlier about, you know, seeing people in dreams. We see people in our dreams. We're doing healing work. Even someone said to Kerry just now, you know, you appeared in my dream. We do appear in people's dreams, but you know, if we're multidimensional beings, we're probably appearing in a lot of people's dreams. So we don't necessarily remember that experience. You know, we remember a fraction of what's, you know, really happening to us. And, you know, once a friend of mine said, "Oh, we were in Hawaii last night." And I'd stood in the mirror that morning and gone, "Oh my God, I look like I've got a suntan." You know, so maybe it's true, you know, maybe these things are happening. Does anybody else have a question? Oh, shall I go to the... Yeah.
How are we going to get rid of the darkness on this planet?
By you being the light that you are. Yeah, but from my perception of reality, I don't, you know, until you just said that, then, you know, I'd fail a dementia test. I have no idea who the prime minister or the president is. It's not in my reality. It's of no consequence to me that he can get on with doing whatever he's doing. I'm in my life living my reality.
I would say that's great until they come knocking on the door.
But they're not necessarily going to come knocking on the door. And to be honest with you, they did come knocking on the door during the Ovid times. I was speaking at a protest, and I'd had a very successful other speaking at a protest because I was talking about the care homes and made people cry and they went into their hearts, which was my intention. And then I spoke at another one. I thought, oh, I don't really need to be here doing this. I don't think I'm not going to convince people in Glastonbury where I live, and they're either awake or they're not. And then the police came to my house a couple of days later, and so I filmed them. And they read me my rights. And it was obviously a good experience for me because I was like, oh, this is such an unknown period of time. You know, am I going to be a domestic terrorist? Am I going to be taken to prison? You know, oh, how would I feel? So I went through the process of, you know, imagining what it would feel like to go to prison, you know, to be a domestic terrorist, not be able to leave the UK anymore. So I went into all that and released it. And then I asked my authentic higher self, whatever you want to call it, for some guidance on how I was not going to pay this fine, because I really wasn't going to pay it. So I wrote a letter saying, blah, 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 under Section 4 of the Coronavirus Act, blah, 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 blah. None of these things have been adhered to. You can't serve me this fine. They dragged it on for 9 months, and 3 days before the court hearing, they dropped it. Now, I'd gone to the court that it should have been, which was Weston-super-Mare, and it was quite interesting because they'd built the Towers of Babel outside the court doors, and they'd put a sort of like, there wasn't a round tower, they'd done two halves where you could walk through the middle. So I did some light language, set my energy into that court of equity, so that my energy would be received in that court of equity. And then they dropped the case. That's how you do it. They've not done the inner work on themselves. You have to use, also the other thing is you do have to use huge discernment, you know, in how it's your energy. If you have anger and aggression, you're going to attract that. I know people will struggle to believe this, but social media is a vibrational game. And if you know how to play that game, you can reverse. You know, what I was listed on Facebook during the COVID times as living in Afghanistan. You know, I'm not living in Afghanistan, but that was how they rank you. It's all gone now, completely gone now. So it really is your own vibration, and you have to see it in yourself. You have to see if you're confrontational, if you're angry, if you believe that people have more power than you, if you believe that these figures outside of you, you're empowering them by your rage and anger towards them. You're empowering them to be the very thing they want to be. You're giving them that energy, and that might be hard for you to realize that, but that's the game, and it's a game. You know, it really is a game. And when you increase your vibration, they'll still be running their... Politics isn't going to stop. It's just going to be over there, but the rest of us will be over here, and there'll be nobody interested in it anymore.
Do you see a termination of that kind?
Personally, no. I don't think that we're going to end the planet. I think it's exactly what you say. It's rising. Our frequency will. If you've raised your frequency, you've done the inner work. You're going to be able to withstand whatever is meant to be. You know, and if it is your time to go, then so be it. But you know, when I was having my awakening in the beginning, I was losing physical density in my beginning awakening 23 years ago, and so I felt like I could have left if I'd have wanted to, but I chose to stay. So I came back into physicality to stay. You know, so some days I have experiences of feeling multidimensional, being very tall. People have seen me be very tall. I've been photographed being very tall. I've also been photographed on top of Glastonbury Tor being just an energy being, just pure white. That's all I am. So we're multidimensional, so we can stay or go. It's up to you whether you fancy staying or going. Once you have mastery of yourself, you know, stay or go, do what you want. You know, nobody has any more power over you than you, really. You know, any other questions? Oh.
What would you call a time slip? How would you explain that?
I think we have time slips all the time. I mean, glitches. I've had glitches. I've seen people that obviously exist in another timeline of reality. I saw a guy with a tricorn hat in the city of London once when I was giving someone a lift when all the tubes were on strike and there was no buses, there was no tubes, nobody could get a taxi. There's no way that guy was in City of London in a tricorn hat and now on the Brompton Road from me saying out of the car to the friend and driving straight back. There's no way he got there in that timeline. So, you know, that's an experience of a, you know, slipping timeline and lost time, bits of the road disappearing, you know, and seems like, oh, it's going to take me hours to get here, and all of a sudden you're there, you know, and time seems to have not happened, and you've bent time and reality. But the thing is, it's so easy to forget that we're this powerful. You know, it's so easy to forget to set your intention that we don't do it. You know, before you go to sleep, just say, I'm not prepared to go anywhere in my dream time that isn't benevolent to my physical body in this dimension of reality. So simple, but you know, we don't set that intention for what we're available for. And if you don't set the intention, tacit consent is what they work on. You know, when I talk to the clients and these lower astral realm beings, they're like, she doesn't know who she is. He doesn't know who he is. They seem naive and gullible, and I can take advantage of them through tacit consent of you just not owning the power of what you're able to do and giving it away to other people who seem to either be more confident or more knowledgeable about something than you are. And this all goes back to the past lives of you being less than who you truly are, you know, back to the inner child of you being less than who you truly are, making other people happy. Same with the ancestors, the pattern of the ancestors, you know. The minute you start awakening, who hates this the most? Your family. You know, woo! You know, they all think you're mad or crazy, most of them. You know, mine do, you know. They really don't understand what I'm doing, you know, and yet some of them have had mystical experiences, but they don't get it, you know. It's just how it is. The fact that I healed my ankle, my cousin hasn't forgiven me because I couldn't drive the car to go and pick my mum and dad up so they could be at his wedding, and I'm to blame. You know, yeah, I healed my ankle without surgery. Do you see? It's the story you tell, and we've all come from the same background with families. So to be here today, pat yourself on the back, because you're not towing the line. You're not going with the story of the family. You've already broken away. By being here shows you your divinity, that you are awake and aware, as the conference is called. Yeah, I'll just tell you one little story, and then we'll do a light language, because it ties in with what you say. I had a client recently. She's exceptionally poorly, and she'd had an affair in this lifetime with a man she went to school with in this lifetime, but she'd known him in a past life, because she had an affair with, when she was a man in a past life, she had an affair with his wife. Well, I think she was a cute young guy in the past life, and the girl probably really loved him. But the big wealthy baron came along and wanted to marry the pretty girl, and so he then found out that she hadn't stopped seeing the lovely young man, and so he killed him, and she got throat issues in this lifetime. And I said, "Oh, you've got some throat issues?" And she said, "Oh, yes." She knew. She said, "That's from where the man I had the affair with had, killed me in a past life." And incarnated in this lifetime as her 14-year-old, well, she remembers him as being 14 at school, 14-year-old schoolmate. They met again as adults, even though she was married with 2 children in this lifetime. She met him again. She had an affair with him. She got pregnant. Her husband, very lovely man, said, "We'll just pretend it's ours." Won't say anything. Lovely husband. She said, "No, I can't do that. I've got to get rid of the baby." So she got rid of the baby in this lifetime, and, wondering why she's got all these health ailments. So she ends it with the man she's having the affair with, who she'd been to school with when she was 14. He then got another girlfriend, still a bad egg, not a good man. He then killed that woman with a crowbar. So a bad soul, still hasn't learned, still a bad soul. She's now full of anxiety and guilt-ridden and all kinds of emotions still. No wonder she's very sick and poorly, because he's been in prison for 17 years and about to come out. So unless we resolve all this stuff in the court of equity, which is not the court outside yourself that you go to, the maritime court and all that. The court of equity is in your own soul. That is the only court of equity where you can find true resolution, is within you. And with that, I will sing a light language, and then I think my time is up. I will be in the little dining area, and I've got some trinkets out there if you're interested and you've got other questions. So with the light language, it's sophophonic frequency. If you want to stand up and sit down a minute, because you've been stood still for quite a long time, just wiggle about and then just sit down, and then I'll do a light language. It will just be a few minutes, like sound frequency healing. Ilara tukoya inara, isara tukoya na kuya.